Mr. Speaker, I beg to move. OK, you may say that, but you should hear Jean-Claude Juncker's voice as a result of our conversation. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the motion on the order paper in my name and that of my right honourable friends. It has been 8 weeks since this House held the meaningful vote on the Brexit deal. On that day, Parliament sent a message: the deal needed to change. In response, the government has worked hard to secure an improved deal that responded to the concerns of this House. I took the concerns of this House about the backstop to the EU, sat down with President Juncker and President Tusk. I spoke to every single EU leader, some on multiple occasions, to make clear to them what needed to change. My right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for exiting the European Union, worked tirelessly with his opposite number, Michel Barnier. My right honourable friend, the Attorney General, engaged in detailed legal discussion with his counterparts in the European Commission. The result of this work is the improved Brexit deal that is before the House today. I will go on to explain in detail what has improved about the deal since January and why I believe it deserves the support of every member this evening. But first, I'll give way to them.
Isn't one of the problems the House faced in the previous session with the Attorney General that we were seeking legal answers to what were essentially political questions? And the political question that we now face is that if we don't pass this motion, we stand to lose Brexit in its entirety.
The honourable gentleman makes a very important point. A lot of focus has been put on legal changes, and I'll come on to the fact that there are legally binding changes as a result of the discussions since the House's vote on the 29th of January. But if I'll just complete this, but the right honourable gentleman is absolutely correct. The danger for those of us who want to deliver, to have faith with the British public and deliver on their vote for Brexit, is that if this vote is not passed tonight, if this deal is not passed, then Brexit could be lost. Give way to my other friend.
Thank my honourable friend for giving way. She may have slightly lost her voice, but is it not true that were we to have a second referendum, 17.5 million people would have lost their voice?
Yes. Can I say to my honourable friend will not be surprised, given what he's heard me say from this dispatch box before, that I entirely agree with him. I believe it is absolutely imperative for this House that we meet the decision that was taken by the British people in June 2016, that we deliver on that referendum and that we deliver Brexit for the British people. And as I say, there is a danger with a failure to agree a deal that actually could end up in a situation where we have no Brexit at all. I'll give way to the honourable gentleman and then I'll give way.
Thank the Prime Minister for giving way. Jean-Claude Juncker was very clear in his press conference, which he was sitting alongside yesterday. This is the end of the road for negotiation. There is no further negotiation from here. Does the government completely accept that? And therefore, what happens if her motion is defeated tonight?
Can I say to the honourable gentleman, he's absolutely right. That's what Jean-Claude Juncker said in his press conference. It's what he'd made clear to me and to ministers. It's what other leaders have made clear as well. So, as I believe that tonight, members of this House are faced with a very clear choice. Vote and support this deal, in which case we leave the European Union with a deal, and I'll go on to explain why I think it's a good deal, or risk no deal or no Brexit. These are the options. If honourable members will just bear with me, I will take a further intervention, a further couple of interventions, and then I will try to make some progress, as I'm only 2 pages into my speech at the moment. Well,
with the Prime Minister giving way, she will know that I didn't support the withdrawal agreement at the last vote, and today I will support it. Forgive me, Prime Minister. Forgive me unenthusiastically, but I will support it because I completely agree with her that there is the danger that Brexit will be lost. And it doesn't appear to be the votes in this House for no deal, but there certainly seems to be, could be the votes in this House for an extension of Article 50. None of those would deliver Brexit. They would frustrate and delay it and possibly stop it altogether. Can I say the main reason that I'm supporting the government tonight is there has been a definitive legal material change on the issue of the backstop, and that is if the European Union acts in bad faith, that the UK can permanently or on a temporary basis remove itself.
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right. I will come on to address this point a little later in my speech, but it's very clear. We've already seen a vote in this House that has said no to no deal, and I think everybody needs to recognise, for those who want genuinely to deliver Brexit, that actually if this deal does not go through tonight, then this House risks no Brexit at all. I will give way finally in this stage to the Honourable Lady.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm very grateful to the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister, I think, should just spell out to this House that if we do not have a deal tonight, agreed tonight, all the arguments that we've heard, and we've listened to the Attorney General's advice about the backstop, those arguments become academic. We will not even enter into the implementation period and begin the work on the alternative arrangements to deal with the backstop if we don't get a deal. So we have to get a deal, then the implementation period, alternative arrangements during that period of time, down to Christmas of next year, before we even contemplate a backstop. Will the Prime Minister confirm we need a deal tonight?
Can I thank the Honourable Lady? She has set it out very clearly for the House, and I'm sure every member of this House will have heard what she has said about that. Now, I said I would make some further progress, because first I want to remind the House of the core elements of the deal on which these improvements are built. First of all, the full reciprocal protection of the rights of EU citizens in the United Kingdom, of UK citizens elsewhere in the EU, delivered by the deal. The implementation period that the Honourable Lady has just referred to give everyone, especially businesses, the time to adjust and to eliminate a cliff edge when we leave, that's delivered by the deal, that implementation period. The full control over taxpayers' money that comes from ending vast annual membership payments to the EU, delivered by the deal. The end of free movement and its replacement with a skills-based immigration system, delivered by the deal. The end of ECJ jurisdiction in the UK. The end of the Common Agricultural Policy for farmers. The end of the Common Fisheries Policy for our coastal communities. All of these are delivered by the deal. The closest possible economic relationship with our nearest neighbours outside the single market and the customs union, with our businesses able to trade freely without any tariffs, quotas or rules of origin checks. Protection for the just-in-time supply chains that provide the livelihoods of millions of families. The ability to strike our own free trade deals around the world. All delivered by the deal. The closest security partnership between the EU and any third country, so our police and security services can keep on keeping us safe in a world that contains many dangers, delivered by the deal. And by doing all of these things, the deal says and does something even more profound. It sends a message to the whole world about the sort of country the United Kingdom will be in the years and decades ahead. I will in just a moment. To our friends and allies who have long looked up to us as a beacon of pragmatism and decency, and a message to those who do not share our values and whose interests diverge from ours. It says this: the UK is a country that honours the democratic decisions taken by our people in referendums and in elections. I'll give way to the honourable gentleman.
I'm extremely grateful to the Prime Minister. Before she continues with this Britannic hyperbole, can she tell me what changes have come about to the agreement that were sought by the devolved governments in Scotland and in Wales, or were there none at all?
As the honourable gentleman knows, the devolved government in Scotland wants to ensure that we stay in the European Union. That is not a position. That is not a position that was taken by the British people, and I believe, as I've just said, that we should honour democratic decisions taken by the people. I'll give way to my honourable friend and then to my own.
Grateful to the Prime Minister. As she will recall, I voted against the withdrawal agreement in January. I'm very pleased that she and the Attorney General have been able to achieve the concessions to the withdrawal agreement. What my constituents, what my businesses want is certainty. And what they want is the certainty that the Prime Minister will not give in to the SNP's demand to a second referendum. And does she agree that this deal gives the country that certainty my businesses and constituents need?
Can I say to my honourable friend, I'm very happy to give him that certainty. As I say, I believe that we should be delivering on the vote of the British people in 2016, but I also believe it is important that we give businesses, as my honourable friend has said, the certainty for their future. And there is only one certainty if we do not pass this vote tonight, and that is that uncertainty will continue for our citizens and for our businesses. I give way to you.
May I ask the question of the Prime Minister about the unilateral declaration? And I thank her for listening, as I've been trying to make the case for it the last 2 months. But there's a question I put to the Attorney General, which I think has now been answered. The unilateral declaration, am I right in saying, states that there is nothing to stop the United Kingdom leaving the backstop if talks break down? That is a very clear unilateral statement. If talks break down, it doesn't have to prove, am I right in saying this, that the EU has to prove good faith. It is a unilateral declaration. And we do not have to use the words conditional because the EU has not objected, and if we lay this declaration at the time of ratification, it is binding on the EU.
Can I say to my honourable friend, one of the key elements that, in relation to what he has said, is that this unilateral declaration has not been objected to by the European Union. That is what ensures its legal status and its legal basis. And as he says, what we say in there is that in the circumstances in which it is not possible to arrange the future relationship with the European Union, then the United Kingdom is recording its understanding that nothing in the withdrawal agreement would prevent it from instigating measures that could ultimately lead to disapplication of obligations in relation to the protocol. Now, I will make some further progress before I give way again, because this is a country, we are a country, where passionately held views do not stop us from making compromises to achieve progress. We're a country that values both our national sovereignty and the unbreakable bonds of a shared history and an independent future that connect us to our friends and neighbours. A bad deal would be even worse than no deal, but best of all is a good deal, and this is a good deal. Mr. Speaker, members acknowledged many of the benefits delivered by the deal, but nonetheless rejected it in January. So let me now set out what we've added to the deal on the table since the last vote. On the rights of EU citizens, we've waived the application fee so that there's now no financial barrier for any EU nationals who wish to stay. As I've said before, they are our friends, our neighbours, our colleagues. They've added much to our country and we want them to stay. On the rights of workers and on environmental protections, assurances about the government's firm intentions were not enough. So we have committed to protecting those rights and standards in law. And if the EU expands workers' rights, we will debate those measures here in this Parliament, and that this House will vote on if we want to follow suit. In just a moment, this Parliament has already set world-leading standards, and after we leave the EU, we will continue to do so. I give way to the Honourable Lady.
The Right Honourable Lady for giving way, and I hope that her voice lasts out to the end of the speech. The DUP have just announced that they're not supporting her deal. Her own ERG have announced that they're not happy with the deal. Doesn't she now think that she should have reached out across party from the beginning to seek a proper consensus across this country to give us a chance of moving forwards? And will she now admit that her strategy has comprehensively failed?
To the Honourable Lady, that there have been alternative approaches to the deal that is on the table that have been proposed. They were proposed the other week by the Leader of the Opposition. That was comprehensively rejected by this House. There has been no... We have continued to work with members across this House and continue to work with members across this chamber to understand the issues that need to be addressed. And what we have done on workers' rights is one example of exactly that work. I know I'm going to make some progress. I know that for many members on this side of the House, and also for the DUP, the biggest concern was about a more difficult issue which defies simple solution, the Northern Ireland backstop. It is a complex issue that reflects the complex history of these islands and the long and difficult road that successive generations of British and Irish people have walked down to reach the peace and stability that we have known for the last 20 years. I've talked in detail about the backstop many times in speeches and statements in this House and in Northern Ireland. I've explained why an insurance policy to guarantee no hard border between Ireland and Northern Ireland is necessary. I know that there are a number of concerns about how it might operate, none greater than the fear that the EU might seek to trap us in it indefinitely. Along with the Attorney General and the Brexit Secretary, I fought hard and explored every idea and avenue to address these concerns, including a time limit, a unilateral exit mechanism, or the replacement of the backstop with alternative arrangements. Just in a minute, but the House knows how complex negotiations work, and ultimately you have to practice the art of the possible. And I'm certain that we've secured the very best changes which were available. And as the Honourable Lady made clear earlier, it has been absolutely clear that this is the deal. I give way to the Honourable Gentleman.
I thank the Prime Minister for giving way, and she knows why I won't be voting for the deal tonight, because it will make my constituents poorer and less safe. But on this specific issue of the legal advice from the Attorney General over this complex issue of the Northern Ireland backstop, could she confirm whether she was given preliminary advice on Saturday or Sunday that he was unlikely to be able to change his advice in perhaps the way that the Prime Minister wished him to?
Can I say to the Honourable Gentleman that obviously the Attorney General has been involved in the discussions that we've been having with the European Union, but at the end of the day it is up to him to make his legal opinion and to give his legal advice to this House, which is exactly what he has done.
Thank my right friend for giving way. I believe she just said this is the deal. Is it not the case that if Parliament votes against this deal and then in the forthcoming days were to vote for an extension, wouldn't that not only be incredibly bad for businesses who desperately want an end to this uncertainty, but also risk putting the ball into the EU's court for determining the terms of that extension?
My honourable friend is absolutely right. First of all that would do is extend uncertainty. But secondly, it is not a guarantee that any extension would be agreed by the European Union, or that they would agree an extension in the terms in which the United Kingdom asked for it. Because an extension has to be agreed by all of the parties, and that includes the 27 members of the European Union. I'll give way to the Honourable Gentleman.
Sir, and I'll give her a moment maybe to get another cough sweep from the Chancellor as well. It's clear, and you can see from the benches here, it's clear that the Prime Minister is going to lose tonight and to lose badly, which will drag this place and also jobs and businesses over the edge with that threat of a no deal. It's a responsible thing to do now, not to seek that extension so that we can get some kind of way out of this calamity.
Minister! The way out of the situation we're in is to have faith with the British people and vote for the deal this evening that gives them what they voted for in the referendum. I will give way to my right honourable.
I thank the Prime Minister for giving way. As she knows, many of us would have preferred a circumstance where we could unilaterally have withdrawn from this agreement, and that does not apply after what the Attorney General said earlier. That means we're going to a circumstance where there will be a deal of trust with respect to how we resolve the backstop, and in particular over the issue of whether the alternative arrangements prove acceptable to the European Union and the Republic of Ireland. Some of those alternative arrangements are ones that have previously been rejected by the Union and the Republic of Ireland. Can she tell the House whether she detected any change in mood on the part of the Union and the Republic with respect to a constructive outcome to the dealing with the Northern Ireland border?
Yes, can I say to my honourable friend, I think what has been obvious is a change in willingness from the European Union to be actively working on those alternative arrangements. As he's heard me say before, it was not possible to complete that work in time for the timetable we currently have, pre the 29th of March, but the firm commitments that have been given in the documents that we have negotiated now with the European Union show that willingness on their side to be actively working with us to find those alternative arrangements and to define them in a way that it means that the backstop can indeed be replaced. Now, I'm going to make some progress. I'm going to make some progress because there are three elements to the improved deal on the backstop, and I want to go through all of those. The first is a joint instrument, not a further exchange of letters, but something with comparable legal weight to the withdrawal agreement. It provides a new, concrete, legally binding commitment that the EU cannot act with the intent of applying the backstop indefinitely. Doing so would breach the EU's obligations under the withdrawal agreement and could be challenged through arbitration. Were the EU to be found in breach, the UK could ultimately choose to suspend the backstop altogether, with that suspension lasting unless and until the EU came into compliance with international law. In these circumstances, we could also take proportionate measures to suspend the payments of the financial settlement. Just as important, the joint instrument gives a legal commitment that whatever replaces the backstop does not need to replicate it, providing it meets the underlying objectives of no hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. I give way to the honourable gentleman.
For the honourable lady for giving way. She's talking about the EU suspending, and she's talked earlier about bad faith and the UK being a beacon across the world and it sticks to its deals, she said. But can she remind them, and particularly in Europe they wanted to remember this point, that when 28 countries went to Salzburg in November and made a deal and struck a deal, who then later ratted on the deal, leaving the 27 high and dry? Was it her government?
Prime Minister.
Can I say to the honourable gentleman, first of all, his history is a little wrong, because actually the agreement on the withdrawal agreement and the political declaration of the future framework were not agreed in Salzburg. They were agreed later last year in November in Brussels. And secondly, he says, who was it who went back on the deal? Was it the government? No, the government voted for the deal. He voted against it. So on that point, if he wants to look for an example of bad faith, look in the mirror. Now, some colleagues, I'll give way to the Select Committee Chairman.
Very grateful to the Prime Minister for giving way. She referred a moment ago to the possibility of the UK suspending the operation of the Northern Ireland Protocol. In his legal advice published today, the Attorney-General talks also about measures to disapply the provisions of the protocol. Can she tell the House whether suspension, which has to be temporary under the withdrawal agreement, and disapplication are one and the same thing, or are they different?
They're not one and the same thing, but also, can I say to the right honourable gentleman, that in fact, if you look at the arrangements that are in the withdrawal agreement and as supported by the new instruments that we have negotiated, it is the case that if suspension takes place over a period of time, such that it is then obvious that the arrangements were no longer necessary, they wouldn't have been in place, and everything would have been operating without those arrangements, then actually a termination of those arrangements is possible within the arrangements here. Now, some colleagues were concerned that the political declaration says that the future relationship... I'll just make a little for more progress. The political declaration says that the future relationship will build and improve on these arrangements. We now have a binding commitment that whatever replaces the backstop does not have to replicate them. The instrument also contains commitments on how the UK and EU intend to deliver the alternative arrangements. Immediately after the ratification of the withdrawal agreement, we will establish a specific negotiating track on alternative arrangements to agree them before the end of December 2020. The instrument also entrenches in legally binding form the commitments made in January's exchange of letters between Presidents Tusk and Juncker and myself. These include, and I'll just cover this point, these include the specific meaning of best endeavours, the need for negotiations to be taken forward urgently, the ability to provisionally apply any agreement, which reduces the risk of us ever going into the backstop, and a confirmation of the assurances made to the people of Northern Ireland. I'll give way to the Honourable Lady first, and then you.
I'm very grateful to the Prime Minister for giving way. I was puzzled by her claim that the joint instrument is of comparable legal weight to the withdrawal agreement. I'm sure she'll be aware, as a matter of international law, the withdrawal agreement is a treaty. Yep. The joint instrument is not a treaty. Yep. It's merely what's known as a document of reference that can be used to interpret the withdrawal agreement. So would she care to rephrase her assertion that the joint instrument is of comparable legal weight to the withdrawal agreement, because it's simply wrong as a matter of law?
Exactly.
Prime Minister.
I say to the Honourable Lady that obviously the withdrawal agreement is an international treaty. This is a joint instrument which sits alongside that international treaty, which does have the same standing in that in any consideration that is given to any aspect of that withdrawal agreement, this will be part of that consideration. So it is, the effect is the same, as I indicated earlier. I said I would give way to the Honourable Lady.
It does need to be said that most of us, when we're unwell, can take to our beds, but it is absolutely noticed by everybody in this House that this Prime Minister just simply battles on, and it's appreciated. Having said that, I fear this is too little, too late. The Prime Minister talked about compromise. Would she agree and confirm that some 2 years ago, I and others who sit behind her told her that there was a majority, a compromise across this House for the single market and the customs union that would have delivered on the referendum, secured the problem with the border and done the right thing for business? Would she confirm that she rejected all of that, and the difficulty has been her inability to move away from her red lines?
Prime Minister.
To the Honourable Lady, Right Honourable Lady. The point is we have to look at what it was that the British people were voting for when they voted in the referendum in 2016. We also have to look on the manifesto that at the time of the last general election she and I both stood on, which was very clear in relation to those matters in the customs union and the single market. What we've put forward are proposals which enjoy benefits of some of the benefits of a customs union, like no tariffs, no rules of origin checks, but do it in a way that delivers an independent trade policy. That's what people want to see, and that's what we will be delivering. I will just make a little more progress before I take any more interventions. I have been quite generous already on interventions. I wanted to say a word about Gibraltar. On Gibraltar, these documents confirm the understanding reached between the UK and the EU on the interpretation of Article 184 of the withdrawal agreement as regards territorial scope of the future relationship. We will always stand behind British sovereignty for Gibraltar, and the UK government negotiates for the whole UK family, including Gibraltar. The second element that we've negotiated is a UK-EU joint statement in relation to the political declaration. I will give way in a few moments, just make a little more progress. The political declaration, this second element, the statement in relation to the political declaration, sets out a number of commitments to enhance and speed up the process of negotiating and bringing into force the future relationship. There is a new commitment that the negotiating track on alternative arrangements will consider not only existing facilitations and technologies, but also those emerging. Third, I'll give way to the Honourable Lady and then.
I thank the Prime Minister for giving way on that point, and she did say earlier that she thought there'd been a change in attitude about looking at different ways of dealing with the Northern Ireland-Irish border. Would she agree with me that if the Irish Taoiseach did what the previous Irish Taoiseach did, which was allow the civil servants to meet with our civil servants, that if there really was goodwill and intention, that the Taoiseach would now say that their civil servants should start the process now and not wait until we've gone much further along the line?
Minister.
Can I simply say to the Right Honourable Lady that we are happy at any stage to sit down with the Irish Government and to talk to them about the arrangements that could be in place in relation to the Northern Ireland border with Ireland.
On Gibraltar, can she confirm that well over 90% of the people of Gibraltar voted to remain in the European Union, and that if her deal goes down tonight, it will be essential that Gibraltar continues to have a relationship as close as possible with the European Union single market?
What can I say? He was right about his facts in terms of the vote. And of course, significantly, the last time the people of Gibraltar were asked whether they wanted to continue their relationship with the United Kingdom, they were very clear, overwhelmingly, that that was what they wanted. That's why we are clear that we negotiate on behalf of our whole UK family. What the deal that is on the table tonight, the deal that people will be voting for, delivers the close relationship for the future that the honourable gentleman has been talking about. What it does is it delivers on the result of the referendum, but it also recognises the importance of a close relationship for us for the future with the European Union. I'm now going to make some further progress. Third, alongside the joint instrument on the withdrawal agreement, the United Kingdom government will make a unilateral declaration relating to the temporary nature of the backstop. Such declarations are commonly used by states alongside the ratification of treaties. The declaration clarifies what the UK could do if it was not possible to conclude an agreement which superseded the protocol because the EU had acted contrary to its obligations. In these circumstances, the UK's understanding is that nothing in the withdrawal agreement would prevent us from instigating measures that could ultimately lead to the disapplication of our obligations under the protocol. Were we to take such measures, the UK would remain in full compliance with its obligations under the Belfast Good Friday Agreement and to avoid a hard border on the island of Ireland. I'll give way to the honourable lady.
I'm very grateful to the Prime Minister for giving way, and I really do want to know why the Prime Minister has consistently sought to get a deal that satisfies hardliners on her own side, rather than reaching out across the chamber to get an agreement that would be a softer Brexit, but it would protect the Good Friday Agreement in Northern Ireland more than her current deal does.
Can I say to the Minister? First of all, if she thought I was placating everybody on my side of the House, I don't think the vote would have been rejected in the first place. So I think she's rather wrong on that. Secondly, I did reach out to the front bench of the opposition of her party. I had a meeting with the Leader of the Opposition. There was one meeting between the Chancellor of Duchy of Lancaster and the Shadow Secretary of State. We offered other meetings, and voice came there back none. So that's I'll make some further progress. Mr. Speaker, there are considerable improvements on the deal that the House considered 8 weeks ago. In particular, there were 3 key issues raised by my honourable friend, the member for Altrincham and Sale West. On the question of giving legal status to the assurances on the backstop, the joint instrument is a legally binding text at the same level as the withdrawal agreement, namely a treaty-level instrument. On alternative arrangements, we have an agreement that they will replace the backstop, and this commitment is in the legal instrument, not just the political declaration. And on the question of an end date, the core concern of colleagues was that we should not be trapped indefinitely in the backstop. The Attorney-General has today changed his legal analysis to note that this risk has been reduced and that if the EU were to act in bad faith, short of their best endeavours, the backstop could be suspended or even terminated. And that this is a materially new legal commitment.
Grateful to her for giving way. The Prime Minister's whole strategy this week is depending on expecting that MPs will change their minds in a matter of weeks between votes, at the same time as she won't allow for the fact that the public might have changed their minds in the space of many years, 3 years now. So will she accept that the best chance she has of getting her deal through Parliament would be to make it subject to a confirmatory vote of the public as a result?
Prime Minister. Can I say to the honourable lady, as I've said on many occasions before and as I've indicated earlier in my speech, I profoundly believe that when the Parliament of this country says to the British people that the choice as to whether to join, to remain or to leave the European Union is theirs, and when the government of the day, well, I say to the honourable lady, she says, well, they've changed their minds. There isn't actually evidence that the British people have changed their minds on this. There isn't evidence that the British people have changed their minds. And And where would it end? So what? So you have another referendum, and there's a different result, and then everybody says, well, let's actually have a third one. Or there's another referendum, and there's the same result, and the Honourable Lady would probably still stand up and say she wanted a third referendum to try to overturn the decision. I'll give that.
I'm grateful to the Prime Minister for giving way. The simple fact is that people in my constituency and others who voted leave did so with a promise and expectation of something better. Does she not agree that what we are facing this evening is a choice of voting for a deal that she knows, and I know, this House knows, and I suspect the majority of the people in the country know, that whether it's on economic cooperation or security cooperation, leaves our country demonstrably worse off? Why on earth is she asking us to countenance that?
The Honourable Gentleman, he said that he talked about those in his constituency who voted leave. What is absolutely clear from the analysis that the government published is that if we are going to honour the result of the referendum, and I believe we should, and I'm sure his Leave voters want us to do that, the best deal to deliver for the British people in honouring that referendum is the deal that the government put forward back in the summer. And this deal and this deal that is here tonight is the deal that actually gets us onto the point of negotiating that future relationship in the interests of constituents of everybody sitting across this House. Now, I am going to make some more progress. I know that some right honourable members will still have concerns about the backstop, but real progress has been made, and all of us should put out of our minds the idea that going round this again will get us any further forward. Responsible politics is about pragmatism, about balancing risk and reward. So members across the House should ask themselves whether they want to make the perfect the enemy of the good. Mr. Speaker, given Northern Ireland's unique position and the fact that it will be the only part... Oh, sorry, I did say I would give way to my honourable friend.
I thank my right honourable friend for giving way, and most of us in this place commend her and her team for their stamina in these negotiations. We accept there is a political dimension, but could you just clarify one point for those of us who are concerned about the indefinite nature of the backstop, and that is this. In future, this country could unilaterally decide to walk away from the agreement if there was a fundamental change in circumstances, and we could do that as a United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland, even if that meant Northern Ireland leaving the customs union within the EU.
Prime Minister.
I think this was a point that the Attorney General responded to in his statement earlier, which is that, of course, it is open to any sovereign government to choose to take a decision to disapply something into which it has entered into. Of course, that would have consequences, and I think I'm right in saying my right honourable friend and learned friend indicated that that was not a route that he could recommend ministers to take. But of course, my honourable friend is right that that is always open to a sovereign government to act in that way.
Will the Prime Minister give way?
I'll give way.
I'm very grateful for the Prime Minister giving way. Could the Prime Minister confirm the element of risk of going into the backstop when this country was told that this would be the easiest trade deal in history?
Well, can I say to my honourable friend that, of course, any negotiation between different parties of this sort does take time. Trade deals do take time, often a shorter time than many people think, and we have yet to negotiate the trade deal for the future, which we'll be doing when we get this withdrawal agreement deal through. Now, I'm just going to continue because I want to make a very specific point about Northern Ireland, given its unique position, and the fact that it will be the only part of the UK to share a border with the EU. And I want to set out further commitments today on protections for Northern Ireland and its integral place in the United Kingdom. First, the government will legislate to give a restored Northern Ireland Assembly a vote on a cross-community basis on whether the backstop should be brought into force if there are delays in the trade talks. If Stormont does not support this, then ministers will be bound to seek an approach which would achieve cross-community support. This could, for example, be an extension of the implementation period. It has previously been the case that the understanding was that the choice would be between the backstop and the implementation period. The introduction of alternative arrangements, of course, brings another element into that. But there is that there is that key commitment in relation to the Northern Ireland Assembly. If Stormont does not support this, and if Stormont were to support an implementation period as the alternative, ministers would be bound to seek an extension of the implementation period, assuming that that had achieved cross-community support. Secondly, we will maintain the same regulatory standards across the United Kingdom for as long as the backstop is in force. This is a commitment we have already made, but I can now tell the House that we will legislate to make this legally binding. And thirdly, the Government will legislate to prohibit any expansion of North-South cooperation through the withdrawal agreement. That will remain a matter for the Northern Ireland Executive and Assembly, in line with the Belfast Agreement. In just a moment, I'll just make this further point. At every stage of these negotiations, my determination has been to deliver a deal that works for every part of the United Kingdom, and that includes Northern Ireland. I'll give way to the Honourable Lady.
The Prime Minister has talked a lot about concerns around the backstop, but for many honourable members, the biggest concern is her withdrawal agreement provides no legal certainty about any of the fundamental questions about our future relationship with the EU. As a result, we will be back here time and time again, and that far from providing certainty for the future, her blindfold Brexit is the most uncertain future for our country of all.
Prime Minister. It's a very simple and basic point that the Honourable Lady seems to have forgotten. It is not possible for the European Union to negotiate and sign the legal text of that future trade relationship with the United Kingdom while we are a member of the European Union. We cannot do that until we have left the European Union. So, if the Honourable Lady wants us to get on to negotiating the future relationship, vote for the deal tonight. Let's get on to that next stage. Now, important though the backstop is, it was not the only concern honourable members had. Another was in regards to the political declaration. Because it provides, as the Honourable Lady has hinted at in her question, it provides for a spectrum of possible outcomes. Members asked how they could be confident about what sort of future relationship the government would negotiate. Can I just continue to make my point? I'm sure we can all learn lessons from how we approach this first phase of the negotiations as we move on to the second. For my part, I've no doubt that the government does need to build a strong consensus in the House before we go on to negotiate the future relationship, not least to ensure the process of ratification is smoother than that for the withdrawal agreement. And that's why we've committed to give a much stronger and clearer role for this House and for the other place during the next phase. Not just a consensus in Parliament either. Businesses, trade unions and civil society must all play a much bigger part, contributing their expertise in a collective national effort to secure the very best future relationship with the EU. That new approach, if I just wait for a second, that new approach will start with the withdrawal agreement bill. If the deal passes tonight, notice of presentation will be given tomorrow and the bill will be introduced on Thursday. And as we discuss that bill, we can debate how exactly we will ensure that this Parliament has the full say it deserves. Mr. Speaker, I'll give way.
Can I thank the Prime Minister for giving way? Given the clock is ticking, there are millions of people working in businesses up and down this country that want the most certain outcome, and voting for this deal today is the best way of delivering it. Voting the deal down will lead to more uncertainty, and none of us know where we're going to end up. So I, for one, will be supporting the government of the Prime Minister.
Can I thank my honourable friend? He has made a very important point. Rejecting this deal tonight, the only certain thing about rejecting this deal tonight is that it increases uncertainty. Businesses and individuals want certainty.
And I do feel for my right honourable friend with the throat condition she's got at the moment, I really do. But having said that, she's referred to the fact that the backstop is very important. We all know that, and rightly so. The question, however, is also under this withdrawal agreement and the withdrawal implementation bill which is to come. First of all, we haven't seen a draft of it, and I'm hoping we can get that very soon, as my European Scrutiny Committee have just said in the report. But the second thing is that in there it is quite clear that we will not be discharging what she said herself at Lancaster House. We would not truly leave the European Union unless we regain control of our own laws. Under Article 4, it's clear that that is not the case. What is the answer of my honourable friend to that point?
Prime Minister. To my honourable friend. First of all, I'm pleased to hear that he's keen to see the withdrawal agreement bill. That bill, of course, as I've said, will be presented to this House this week if my honourable friend and others vote for this deal tonight to get this deal through. If my right honourable learned friend. But I also say to my honourable friend, yes, there are provisions in relation to the role of the European Court of Justice during the period for our winding down and winding our way out of the European Union. But it is clear, and that covers the implementation period. What is absolutely clear is once we are beyond that point, there is no jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice other than for a limited period of years in relation to citizens' rights. There is no jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice in this country. I give way to the floor.
She just said that if she manages to get her withdrawal agreement approved by this House, she doesn't want the next stage of serious negotiations about our long-term future to proceed in the same way, and she's giving a greater role to Parliament. I strongly endorse that. We can't have another arrangement where she just reaches a perfectly satisfactory agreement on the 3 points she did, and then we descend into parliamentary farce as different people argue about what changes they like. So isn't the best way of proceeding, if she gets her withdrawal agreement through, then to have some indicative votes in the House of Commons before the serious negotiations start, so the government can go into those negotiations knowing what a broad mass of Parliament is likely to support and back her up if she can achieve it?
Can I thank my learned friend for the point that he's made? Actually, I think there are a number of ways in which we can ascertain what the views of the House would be prior to entering into the next stage of negotiations. And obviously, we have been looking at the details of that and will want to be consulting and talking across the House in relation to that matter. But of course, the first step, as my right honourable and learned friend rightly indicated, in order to get onto that stage, is to pass the deal tonight. Mr. Speaker, I really am going to try and make a little more progress. I have been extremely generous with interventions. Not everybody in this House is as generous as I am when it comes to interventions. Mr. Speaker, I set out to the House 2 weeks ago the specifics of what will happen if the deal is rejected tonight. We will first of all return tomorrow to consider whether the House supports leaving the European Union on the 29th of March without a withdrawal agreement and a framework for a future relationship. If the House votes against no deal, it would vote on whether or not to seek an extension of Article 50. I sincerely hope that the House will not put itself in this invidious position. We can avoid it by supporting what I profoundly believe is a good deal and a substantially better deal than we had 8 weeks ago. But if it comes to it, the choices would be bleak. In the long term, we could ultimately make a success of no deal, but there would be significant economic shock in the short term, and be in no doubt about the impact that would have on businesses and families. We would lose the security cooperation that helps keep us safe from crime, terrorism and other threats, and we would risk weakening support for our union. I note that the Right Honourable Member for Ross, Skye and Lochaber had tabled an amendment seeking a second Scottish independence referendum. Polling shows that support for both Scottish independence and United Ireland would be higher if we leave without a deal. While a no deal in the absence of institutions in Northern Ireland would create a substantial problem of governance there. Should the House reject leaving on the 29th of March without a deal, and then support the government seeking an extension to Article 50, our problems would not be solved. An extension without a plan would prolong the uncertainty threatening jobs and investment. Yet even as it did so, it would not change the debate or the questions that need to be settled. It would merely pass control to the European Union. They would decide how long an extension to offer, meaning we may not get what we ask for. They could even impose conditions on an extension. That could mean moving to a Brexit that does not meet the expectations of those who voted to leave. Or even moving to a second referendum with all the damage that that would do to trust in our democracy. Equally, there is a risk that having voted for an extension, this House would still not be able to agree a way forward, and we would end up leaving without a deal. And just one moment, I'll give way to the Honourable Gentleman. If any of these things were to happen, it would be no good blaming the European Union. Responsibility would lie with this House. Our failure to come together in the national interest to deliver on the vote of the British people. I will give way to the Honourable Gentleman and then the Honourable Gentleman.
Yes, I'm extremely grateful for her giving way. The first of her Brexit secretaries is sitting in his place. Time after time after time, he stood at that dispatch box and he promised this House that we would get the exact same benefits after we leave than we currently enjoy with the EU. Does she not accept that raising expectations that high set a level that she has absolutely failed to meet? That has damaged trust in her Brexit. That has caused the situation that we're in now, and we have to find another way forward.
Minister. I say to the Honourable Gentleman that we have set out in the proposals that the government itself put forward a way of ensuring that we maintain a very close economic partnership with the European Union in the future, a close security partnership with the European Union in the future, but that we are also able to have the benefit of acting as an independent country, of being that sovereign state, and of having our own trade deals with other countries around the world. I said I'd give way to the Honourable Gentleman at the back.
I thank the Prime Minister for giving way, and I welcome her commitment to potentially legislate for the political declaration, albeit I believe doing so in the withdrawal bill only once we voted to endorse the political declaration may be a slightly convoluted way. So could I suggest that there may be a third option to consider? If the deal is not passed this evening, what the Prime Minister could do is independently legislate the political declaration now, setting out in law what the end point will be and what role Parliament will have in statute before we are asked to vote again on a further deal, because that would give people like me the confidence to understand that by voting for the withdrawal agreement, there is certainty on the political declaration about where we're going.
Prime Minister. I thank the Honourable Gentleman for his proposal in relation to that matter. I think one of the issues, though, is that there are elements of the political declaration, of course, that remain to be negotiated, where there is not the certainty that I think he was searching for in the proposal that he put forward. But he certainly, I give him the credit for inventiveness and thinking carefully about these issues. Mr. Speaker, I will give way one final time to the Right Honourable Gentleman.
I thank the Prime Minister. She's being very generous. Would she agree with me, however, that whatever happens today, whether her withdrawal agreement is passed or not, we are going to have an extension to Article 50 because there is not time to complete the business we will need to complete before the 29th of March.
Prime Minister. Honourable Gentleman, let's get the deal agreed tonight. Then the usual channels will work to see what is necessary in relation to getting legislation through this House. Mr. Speaker, it was not this House that... No, I've said...
The Honourable Gentleman was a cheeky chappy chortling and chuckling away from a sedentary position, but it's been made perfectly clear the Prime Minister's not giving way. Prime Minister.
Where is he?
Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I am willing to take I will take the Honourable Gentleman. His Honourable Brother.
I thank the Prime Minister for being so generous with her time. When it comes to the backstop and the changes, it is not the case that the new arrangements come nowhere close to the Brady Amendment. The Malthouse Compromise has been consigned to history. It's a phrase we no longer hear. Paragraph 19 of the legal advice says that the legal risks remain the same in terms of being stuck in the backstop. And also, given there's no technology exists at the moment, she's admitted in terms of a solution for the Northern Ireland border, Stormont could keep the UK in implementation period for a long time until that technology alternative exists.
Prime Minister.
The honourable gentleman, I think I lost count, but I think it's wrong, 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 wrong.
Grateful to the Prime Minister for giving way. On the point that the Prime Minister was making about any conditions that the EU might attach to a request for extension of the Article 50 process, would the Prime Minister agree that whether it's in seeking an extension to the process or even in a no-deal scenario, there's a set of obligations contained within the withdrawal agreement that the EU will want to talk about in either of those circumstances? And as much as we might want to wish them away, voting down the deal tonight does not make those obligations disappear.
Prime Minister.
Right honourable friend for pointing that out, and he is absolutely right. Voting against the deal tonight does not mean that those obligations disappear, which is why I believe it is very important, again, another reason why it's very important for members of this House to go through the lobby in favour of this motion tonight. Mr. Speaker, it was not this House that decided it was time for the United Kingdom to leave the European Union. It was the British people. It falls to us here to implement their decision, their desire for change, their demand for a better, more open, more successful future for our country. And today is the day that we can begin to build that future. This is the moment, and this is the time. Time for us to come together, back this motion and get the deal done. Because only then can we get on with what we came here to do, what we were sent here to do. Each and every one of us came into politics because we have sincerely held views about how to build a better Britain. Some have spent their political careers campaigning against the European Union and in favour of restoring sovereignty to this Parliament. For others, membership of the EU is one of the foundations of their vision of the UK's place in the world. But we also came here to serve. We cannot serve our country by overturning a democratic decision of the British people. We cannot serve by prolonging a debate the British people now wish to see settled. And we cannot serve by refusing to compromise, reinforcing instead of healing the painful divisions we see within our society and across our country. The British people have been clear. They want us to implement the decision they made nearly 3 years ago. So let us show what this House can achieve when we come together. Let us demonstrate what politics is for. Let us prove beyond all doubt that we believe democracy comes before party, faction or personal ambition. The time has come to deliver on the instruction we were given. The time has come to back this deal, and I commend this motion to the House.